All right, you heard it say recording in progress, right? Okay, so you can be my witnesses with Kathy if anything goes wrong.
Witnesses to what?
We were told to record it.
Oh.
So I periodically pull off being decent and in order. I like witnesses when it happens. So this is Vital Congregations, and we could go in lots of directions with this. I have a whole lot to say, and I have a PowerPoint, but I thought it would be helpful if you each told me why you are here and what your context is, because Vital Congregations is sort of designed to be a thing, and part of its intent is for people to use it in ways that are helpful and to be creative with it. And we've already started to do that here in this presbytery, to tweak some things and invent some things. But if I get to hear about your context, that will really help. So who would like to go first? You better not let John go first. He's a pastor. He'll talk a lot.
Well, for lack of anybody else volunteering, I'll start.
Sure, Keith, thank you.
I'm Keith Hare. I am an elder at First Presbyterian in Newark, Ohio. And we have a number of challenges at the moment. Aside from, or in addition to the various challenges of the last 2 years, our pastor moved on in the beginning of the fall.
Mm-hmm.
And so we are working with pulpit supply people at the moment. We don't have an interim pastor yet, and we're beginning to attempt to figure out the next steps.
Right. Okay. Thank
Why
you.
I picked this one is because at some point when I was looking at the information, it looked like it could be interesting, but I don't remember what it was that caused me to think that.
Don't worry, Keith, it's fascinating. Yeah, good. All right. Okay, Kim? You're at Unity?
Kim. Sorry?
You're at Unity, is that right?
Unity, right, yes. So we're not in a completely dissimilar boat. We just joined 3 churches together not too long before COVID, and then COVID hit and we then couldn't afford all of our pastors. So then we got an interim pastor, and then he passed away. And it's been a little rocky. And so now we have we've got someone now for the next 6 months because, pulpit supply, like you mentioned, is just a little challenging. But yeah, it just, that's not exactly the way you want to start a new congregation. It's, and just even trying to keep people together and who's still on board and who have we lost and not really entirely sure. Yeah, it's tough.
Amy House is a dear friend and a co-facilitator for Vital Congregation. So I know a little bit about what's up, and I've been holding you all in prayer. It's really been hard. Sorry. And John, are you at St. Andrews now?
Yeah, at St. Andrew for another 3 months, gap pastor, which is one of those weird names. We are starting, we've finished 3 task force reports as options for the future of St. Andrew, to either sell and move, to merge, or to go out of existence, or to stay and revitalize. So St. Andrew has thought about that for a while. Now it's getting a little more critical. We have 80 members, but so as a gap pastor, the transition is a little different job description, but that's where I am half-time.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, John. Sandy, can you hear us? You can unmute if you're ready to.
Yep, I can hear you.
How are you?
Hello. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Good.
So Sandy's from Washington Courthouse. Do you want to share with us why you chose this, what you're looking for?
I just want to gain some more understanding and see what other churches are doing, what options are. And I think that we're all interested in more members and retaining members. So just important to us and a small community.
Right. Okay. Thank you very
And
much.
How is your new
thank you.
pastor doing, Sandy?
Wonderful. Yep. Doing great. We're
So
very
Sandy,
excited and
Keith
I
was
think
just
settling in
sharing-
well.
Keith was just sharing that his congregation is without a pastor because you now have his pastor.
Oh,
So
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
it's hard. It's a hard,
It is hard.
hard place to
Yes.
be.
Yes.
Okay, so just generally, so vital congregations is the third pillar of Matthew 25, right? The eradicating racism, structural racism, eradicating systemic poverty, and vitalizing our congregations. What that might look like could be any of the things that John was just talking about with St. Andrew, right? This initiative is not saying you do these things and your pews will be filled. That's really, truly not what this is about. That might be what God has in store for your congregation. It might not be. It might be that you end up with fewer members, but they have deep, rich lives and powerful ministries out in the world. There are so many possibilities for what a vital congregation looks like. So I just want you to keep that in mind. You know that from Isaiah, thy ways are not our ways, right? That God has a different way of viewing reality than we do. A good place for a church to be doesn't always look good to us. It doesn't always meet our needs of huge overflowing offering plates and lots of young families, right? There are many other models of vital, healthy church. So let me share my screen with you now. Back to this keynote and find where I am. Okay, so this is one of my very favorite quotes. The glory of God is a human being all the way alive. And the way that I understand that is the more that we mature into the wholeness of the freedom of our true way of being in the world, where our wounds are pretty healed and we're not doing damage and we feel unconstrained, that for freedom Christ has set us free. When we become that, the glory of God is abundantly evident in us in a breathtaking way. And the same thing is true in the level of a congregation, in the body of Christ. The more that place is living out its particular calling, the more alive it is, the more the glory of God radiates from it. So it is that city on a hill, right? There we go. So this is a model that vital congregations people use to talk about church. So some churches are in the growing place, right? And that when we're growing, just like a child or a teen going through a growth spurt, remember, we're like teenage boys who eat out you out of house and home by devouring everything in the refrigerator, right? That growth stage is not designed to be sustained throughout your whole life. So in a congregation, there are spurts of real growth where we've got a new idea, we've got new ministries going, maybe a new pastor has come, something has happened to give us energy and to shift things, and you can see movement forward. That's brilliant. Then we enter into another stage where the newness maybe slows down, the growth maybe slows down, but it's thriving. this, sometimes we look at the administration, the programming of a congregation. That might be part of what's going on. It's vital and it's interesting, and people are showing up to things, and people are volunteering to do things. Members have a sense of ownership in the congregation. It's thriving. Then we can also get to a place where we look at the roles and we've got 100 people who are over 80, and they might be vibrant, fabulous people, but it starts to worry us about the future because we have fewer younger families coming in. And so we're worried about that. And we start to talk about what's going to happen to the church budget. Maybe the members we have are just so tired, they're burnt out, they're exhausted, which I would name as a COVID reality for almost all of our churches right now, right? So people are tired, and they keep at programs because they don't want them to die. They want this program that's always been there, making peanut brittle or building houses for habitat, whatever that ministry of theirs is. They're going to keep doing it till they die because they can't let that ministry die, but they're exhausted and maybe a little bit bitter, and nobody else is coming in, right? This declining stage. And then there's the just plain struggling to survive, right? We don't have enough members to meet the mortgage, and how are we going to just pay our bills? And there's a worry that it would be faithless to let the church die. And part of what we need to say loudly and clearly is that that is not faithless when our God is a God of death and resurrection, right? New life comes out of dead things. And things on this planet have life cycles, and not everything is designed to live forever. Right? So that's a very important part of this work. Think about vitality for yourself. Think about what's saving your life these days. What are the things that give you some energy? What are the things, oops, sorry, you disappeared from my screen. There you go. What is it that keeps you from crumbling in a heap? And it's probably been different things at different points in the last year and a half, right? For me, going out into nature and looking at things and taking pictures has saved my life during certain seasons. It became a spiritual practice where I could focus my attention and find the beauty and the awe and the things that weren't broken, right? So I think it's vital for each of us individually to answer that question, but also in our churches. What's saving your church right now? Where do you see the spirit aflame? Name the good and celebrate the good. Kim, what you all have been through it's like a bad novel, isn't it? I mean, who would believe the next plot twist, right? But I've heard from Amy these amazing things that are still going on at that church, and the way that members have stepped up to be the church and make things happen, right? Celebrate it, name it in worship, right? Look people in the eye with great joy and name them as gifts. Sometimes the first step in our vitality is really remembering to be thankful for the good and sharing that gratitude with each other and to God. So that question of what is saving your life and bringing you vitality, I think is one of those life-saving questions. There are so many little things on my screen, it won't let my buttons push. There we go. This is a book I've read during COVID times about Julian of Norwich, that mystic who spent her life in a little alcove outside a church attached to it, a hermitage. Julian of Norwich and Anchorus, wisdom in a time of pandemic and beyond. She lived through 6 waves of the bubonic plague, right? So COVID on steroids, and yet was able to write, all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. For there is a force of love moving through the universe that holds us fast and will never let us go. I argue one of the things that we have to do for our own vitality and for our congregation's vitality now is renew our commitment or learn a commitment to spiritual disciplines, to things that take us deep inside to that fire of the spirit that dwells inside us. COVID is changing who we are. I think we're all beginning to understand that we're not going to go back to where things were at some point and just pick up where we were and keep going. The world is different now. I've read fascinating arguments that say that our brains are being rewired in a way, right? We think differently. And I'm really beginning to believe that about myself. My energy patterns are different. Now, whether that's age or life circumstances or COVID, who knows? But I'm in a different reality than I was 2 years ago. So we have to grow to learn our way into that reality. What church does the world need now? That should be our question, not how do we get back to, but this world now, what does church need? What does the world need from church? It may be that we are stuck with hybrid models, where Zoom is part of what it means to be church now from here on out. What are the gifts in that? How do we learn to do it well? Maybe some churches thrive on that and some don't do it and they're in person. It's going to look different everywhere, but church is changing in this world. What church do we want to leave our children? Who is God calling us to be in this time, and what are we being asked to do? This is going to mean we're going to have to die to some things so that there's room to come alive. We can't do everything. So part of what Vital Congregations does is give you resources to help you look at who you are now, who you have been, what programs do you have, and look for pruning, to do celebrations of ministries and then allow them to die. Maybe in this age, churches are being called to more acts of justice in the world. If that is possible, how does that fit into our budget, to our way of being? Does something else get removed to make room for it? Or is there a natural place to put it? What is that going to look like in your congregation? So there are 7 marks of vital congregations. If you go to pcusa.org and type in vital congregations, it will take you to this vital congregations page. And down at the bottom, there is here a vital congregations immediate toolkit. Can you see the toolkit? I'm gonna have to stop sharing, come back. It won't let you move too much around on your desktop and still share. Now you see it? Great. How many of you have looked at this? Anybody? Okay, so PCUSA to vital congregations, bottom of the page, you click on it and you get this toolkit that you can print out. In it, you will find some prayer cards, some ways to pray through the 7 marks. And then you'll find some detailed descriptions of these 7 marks of vital congregations. Lifelong discipleship formation. So not just Sunday school for the kids and not just learning about your Bible, but what do you need to know to be a disciple of Jesus? How do you live? If we've decided that we love God and we want to follow Jesus, what does that look like in your life today? And what do you need to learn in order to shape your life? And then in order to support and sustain that life, how do we help each other do that? Intentional, authentic evangelism. It's not going and telling somebody what they have to believe. It's building relationships. It's actually having friendships with people and showing up honestly and all the way and having language to talk about our God experiences. Outward incarnational focus. It's not just about what we do in our buildings. That's a tiny part of what church is. It's about how we're showing up in the world. Empowering servant leadership. We can't sustain, I don't think we ever could sustain that model where we hire the pastor to pray and we hire the pastor to read the Bible for us and we hire the pastor to take care of folks and we hire the pastor to do the justice work, and everybody in that church is doing the work of following Christ. In fact, it's the pastor's job to equip other people to do things. Spirit-inspired worship. Worship too is changing. How do we make worship a place that is conducive to people having experiences of the living God? Caring relationships, learning to be more intimate. It might mean studying Brene Brown's new book on naming feelings and being able to talk about them. It can look like all different kinds of things, but it's about genuine relationships with people. And then ecclesial health. That's good stewardship. That's transparent stewardship, making sure people in the congregation know how the money is being used. Are we using our polity in a life-giving, loving way? Are we paying attention to the gift that the polity is in our church in PCUSA? Okay, I'm going to go back to that in a second, but I want to give you a chance to talk because talking heads will put us to sleep. You okay? Any questions? All right, so in that same resource, there's 2 pages on each one of the marks with more details. And then there's a Bible study on each of those marks. So you could do that with a small group in your church. You can do it with your session. Take a mark at a session meeting and say, okay, well, what are we doing about this? What are all the things in the church that form us into human beings that live lives that we want to live, that are marked by justice and right relationship and genuinely loving people? What do we need to learn? You know, asking people, what do you need help with? Is it parents need to talk about how to help their kids be more resilient in an age when so much is coming at them? Is it people needing to think about how they're going to use their money now when there's even more pressure on it? What is it? What is it that we need to talk about? I'm going to try to go back to the keynote. It's disappeared. Let me call it up again. Okay. Can you see that or not? Is it that black page again with the link? Okay. Stop. Escape. Come back. Okay. Now we're good, right? All right. These are all just talking about those 7 points. We can come back to that if we want. So here are some ways that vital congregations, me as a facilitator, Amy House, when she comes back from leave as a facilitator, these are things that we have to offer you that could, be of help to you with all this right now. Help you think about who your church is. These 7 marks might be a way for you to write your MIF, for example, to format that MIF, to look at each one of those marks and think about how you're living out your mission in the church. We can offer the leaders in your community, particularly you churches that are in transition right now, we can offer you support. We can create a cohort of elders of churches that are in transition so that they can look together about how to help lead their congregations into more vitality without waiting for a pastor to come, right? As a pastor who's looked for calls, I'm going to be excited by a church that's doing things more than I am about a church that has all these things they'd love to do if a pastor would only come. Do you see the difference there? Okay. And there are so many different resources that we can hook you up with about all these things that we've been talking about today. So I don't know how tuned in you are into the structures in presbytery, but there are these commissions, and 2 of them are congregational life and church professionals. And church professionals work more on the pastor end, and congregational life with the congregations. And each pastor and congregation is supposed to have somebody who's their liaison, who's their support. Right? So we're working on shoring that up. And each congregation and pastor should then have resources to help them when they're struggling in some way, right? So all of these things we're working at the presbytery level to build up and make stronger. And vital congregations are some of the tools we're using to do that and then to pass on to churches. So one of the things that we're offering are these cohorts, these groups that meet monthly to look at the 7 marks together and to talk about what's happening in their congregations and how things might become more vital. I'm also making a kind of map of the churches in the presbytery in which we do all kinds of detailed looking at what ministries you're doing and what challenges are you facing. And so that, John, we could look at 2 churches and say, well, maybe, this might be a good link here. You could start out trying to do some ministries together and that could lead to merging, right? That's a possibility. But trying to get a better map of our presbytery so that we have a sense of where those connections might be. And even if churches are perfectly happy in their own integrity, they could still do ministries together. How do we make ourselves more connectional? This is one of the things about being Presbyterian is we call ourselves the Connectional Church, but very often we don't know what anybody else is doing. And sadly, that includes even the pastors, because we get overwhelmed and then we're not spending much time with our colleagues. All right, so talk to me. Anything bubbling up? Any questions? Anything direction you'd like to move in with this conversation?
So is there a cohort of elders from churches in transition?
This is designed to be a start to see, is there an interest in doing that? It's not in the original design of Vital Congregations, but we got permission to create this thing because we have so many of our churches in the presbytery who are in transition, right? I think Old First would be interested in being a part of this, for example. Hilliard might send somebody. I think we could easily put together a cohort if you have people that might be interested in that. And the way that we would work the elder cohort is I would lead it, at least initially, until it felt comfortable.
and motivating elders to spend some more time when they're already struggling and in survival mode is kind of tough.
It is, but you know, these cohorts are designed to be support.
Yep.
Now, I know pastors know, and I think probably everybody sitting here knows that often we know the things that would be good for us and would make us healthier and better to do it, but we think we don't have the time and the energy to do it. Right? It's like Luther's famous quote about, if I didn't pray 2 hours a day, I would never get anything done. Right? So part of this is making the case, your life will actually be easier and better if you agree to do this additional thing. Right. And that might mean letting go of something else at church or somewhere else. So, you know, as a pastor, John, it might mean like relieving an elder of some responsibility to give them the time to do this. There are also pastor cohorts. And I really do think for pastors, if we could spend more time with each other, getting some support and some fresh ideas, our load would be lightened.
We'd make better choices.
Yeah, I think that's true. And there are also resources from sermons to Bible studies and all kinds of things so that you could use some of those resources to also buy yourself some time. Sometimes churches without pastors are also a little bit at a loss of what to do with adult education. Using those Bible studies to look at the 7 marks and then having conversations in the church about how you're doing around those things, you know, could be something that's really fruitful in a time of transition that doesn't keep you just feeling stuck, but orients you towards really understanding now so that you can move towards the future.
Well, and it cuts in half the preparation time. We did a joint study between Rose Run and Covenant last year. So, and the way Kathy Bubb does Bible studies, I mean, she does all the work and we just join in, and Kathy's willing to do that.
Yeah.
But a joint study with whoever leads from the second or third church, it's very doable.
Right. And, you know, Kathy led a Matthew 25 book discussion on poverty a little while ago. And we're also willing to do more of those. I'm going to lead a book discussion on that Brene Brown book I mentioned, Atlas of the Heart, on Zoom. I just put a thing up on my Facebook page and say, anybody want to come? We're going to start next Sunday. Right. So some of us get, like I will get energy from doing this. That will be a thing that will enliven me for the other work that I don't enjoy quite so much. Right. So sharing more of those things, I think, will definitely help us. Maybe just spending some time. Let me give you a minute and see if you can answer this question in whatever form for now. Apart from numbers, apart from like more people in the pews, that kind of answer, what is your hope for your church in terms of the way that you would feel when you walk into it and what it would offer you? Start there, not about more numbers and more giving, but the quality of experience of coming together as church. What would be gift to you if it could offer it to you?
I mean, in simple terms, I think of, and you obviously know a little bit of our church. I mean, we just want it to be home, comfortable, and a reassuring place to walk into. I want it to be positive. I don't want people to be complaining. I mean, it's hard to try and try and try, and then you can't ever please anybody or everybody rather. But I want just everyone to be willing to give more time and make it home.
Mhm. So sometimes that means doing a lot of work on listening,
Right.
on what it means to listen to each other. You know, at Covenant years ago, we devised these groups, little small groups that people signed up for. I can't remember what we called them anymore, but they met for 4 to 6 weeks each group, and the whole purpose was designed around listening. They would have a question that everybody spoke their piece and everybody listened to them. And then there'd be a piece of scripture and they would do Lectio Divina and listen to God. And we had these procedures for what was involved in listening, right? So that there wasn't crosstalk and nobody gave you advice on what you just said. And you would like, I would like say my piece about something. And then John would say, one of the things I heard you say was this. That was really helpful to me. Thank you.
Rules of engagement.
Yes. Yes. To start to make that part of the fabric and culture of the church. Right. And to remember, Sandy, that all these things take time.
Sure.
Right. Just like the 10 pounds I've been losing and gaining and losing and gaining for I don't know how long. It's better than it was a year ago. That's what I've got to say. Right. So, right.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, and you can have fun measuring it too. In my sermon Sunday, I'm going to do something I've said to other churches. I'm going to have a couple of extra membership directories out, and I'm going to say, how many people can you identify by name and face, including the children? And to go through a directory, obviously, a lot of them aren't at worship,
Right.
but how many could you walk up to and say, "Good morning, Sandy"?
Mm-hmm.
And it's an interesting measure. I've done it in each of the churches I've served at, a month, 6 months, a year into the church. Some of these were larger churches that are pretty difficult, and I'm not good with names. But it's a fun way to measure, and yet it makes the point.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd throw it back at you, Sandy, and ask, how would you measure that comfort, happiness, homey feeling? How would you know when you have it?
I don't know. I mean, I think that's the hard part about it. Some of us feel very comfortable at church at some times, and other times not at all. And so I think it's probably, ebb and flows the way everything does. But I'm not sure there's a great measure for a lot of these sort of things. So I think that's why it's hard to obtain it.
Mm-hmm. In that toolkit that I showed you, one of the exercises that you could do really easy with a session uses emojis, right?
Yeah.
For sort of that what you're just talking about there. It's hard to describe, right? So I mean, you could copy a bunch of different emojis and then have things about the church, like ministries or whatever, and ask people to put the emojis by them just very quickly, right? How do you feel about that? And maybe that could start a conversation. That makes you angry. Can you tell us why that makes you angry? And then I'm going to work really hard not to be defensive about it.
Right.
Right. I mean, yeah. A lot of it right now, I think, in a lot of our churches is because our church is in our culture, right? There's a lot of complaining.
Yeah.
There are people that are angry and complaining, and then there are people that are despairing, and there are people who want to come to church where it's the place to escape all that, and it's still people, so we're not escaping it. Right. And we have a God that doesn't appreciate false fronts, right? We're supposed to show up real and bring our lamentations and our anger and whatever's there and actually deal with it. And a lot of churches, a lot of pastors don't have practice dealing with and processing a range of experience and emotion, right? We tend to have our favorite notes.
Yeah.
And this world is really calling for some new. Keith, where are you in all this?
Well, let's see. I'm starting my 6th year on this set of terms on session. And so I'm beginning to burn out.
Mm,
We are slowly beginning to attempt to start figuring out how we go forward. We've lost some number of members in the last couple of years, either because they quit coming or because they went to another church or because they had the audacity to die. And so we are low on people to serve on session, for example.
mhm. So have you redone any models, like changed how your session functions or done any of that kind of structural work?
Over the last 2 years in particular, I think we've stopped doing some things just because we couldn't.
Mhm.
And to be honest, I couldn't tell you all of the things we've stopped doing because I haven't missed them.
That's telling, isn't it?
So there's that level of paring down.
Mhm. So are you guys familiar with the language of adaptive versus technical change? So if you've got a problem and you're trying to shift it, right? Like the church is burnout, but the leaders are burnout. Okay, let's say the leaders are burnout. You could do a technical solution to that, right? You could say, okay, well, instead of having 12 members on session, we're going to go to 8. We're going to reconfigure our commissions this way, right? So it's the same model, but we're going to tighten up the ship and make a little more room in it. And that could be a great move. It could buy you some time.
Well, except we've already done that.
We've already done that.
Adaptive and as a technical.
Right. So technical only gets you so far, right? Because you're still left with burnout people. So you have to do a really adaptive change, do something radically different, right? Maybe you say, okay, we are not going to do church our normal way in the month of July. The pastor's going to show up and they'll be praying and some kind of meditation. So we can come and we can be together. We've got Lucille who's willing to play hymn on the piano so we can all sing one thing. And that's what we're doing for July. And that's all the church programming we're having. And here are all these resources. Here is a park where these people are going to meet on this day. So this Harriet loves to do centering prayer. If anybody wants to do that with her, right? You just, okay, here are some things that people have decided they're going to do. Joe said he's going to go play golf every Wednesday. Who wants to go with Joe? Pete's going to canoe, right? Just, okay, maybe we're going to take a month off and we're not going to do any of the things that we always do. We're not going to fill out a clerk report. We're not going to do any of those things. We're just going to take a break and breathe. And then when we come back, we're going to do a big, I don't know what even to call it, because I'm making it up as I go. We're going to do this thing together where we really sit with how our souls are and how our bodies are and how our minds are. And we're going to ask what we need. And then in small groups, we're going to do this together. And then we're going to start to ask, how can our life at church feed us mind, body, and soul rather than deplete us? And we're going to live our way into an answer for that.
Keith, that works. Okay, I've done it.
Yeah, and not because we planned it, but to some extent we've done different things over the last, we spent a year and a half doing Zoom and drive-in services.
But it was stressful, wasn't it? Coming up with it and
that's not actually the part that stresses me, because I'm in charge of finance, not in charge of worship. Now, the guy who's in charge of worship possibly has some different stresses.
Right. I think, there's a big difference between having some time off because you're looking for a job and having a sabbatical.
Right.
Right. They're entirely different things. And so while we've all had to do things differently over the last 18 months, I don't think very many of us have deliberately called a halt and taken rest in a way that's designed to be life-giving rather than survival.
And that's the big difference. Is it's a yes to a choice rather than doing what you have to do to just survive. You had to do Zoom, you had to do live stream, you had to adapt the services, you had to buy the little communion cups with the stupid wafer on the top.
Impossible to open.
And those were all things we had to do. What did you enjoy doing over the last year and a half? If you look back, what would you say? Now that was a moment of fun, or to use the words of a famous person I heard recently, what gave you the sense of awe?
Well, it's actually the services with whoever we have preaching that are, one of the things that makes it worth doing. And in a large part, it's because the people that are there, you have a problem getting the service started because people are talking to each other. At the end of the service, people hang around and talk to each other.
Good sign.
Yeah. So I think celebrating that is huge. And maybe leaning into that. So maybe if everybody is so stressed trying to do the decent and in order thing, I'm sorry, but decent and order is not called for in every moment. Some moments are just crying out for a little chaos and lethargy, right? Why not have a Sunday where you just show up and everybody talks to each other? And that's church. I don't know. I just think we need to start playing. We need imagination and play. Or we're going to just work ourselves and worry ourselves into the ground far too early.
I think, honestly, kind of part of the reason I wanted to listen to this was, our church has had 4 pastors in a very short period of time. I think that we're all going to constantly be in some sort of transition. And I don't want to be just comfortable, I want to kind of know what's going on, what other churches are doing, the people in transition are doing, whether you have no pastor, a new pastor, looking for, whatever we are, we're all just kind of floating right now, waiting until the next thing comes.
Right.
Which I guess is part of life in general. So just like learning to be ahead of the curve a little bit and not so worried about following every single rule. I mean, I think as Presbyterians, we're rule followers in general. I mean, you sat through some of our session meetings and you're like, we don't always have to be so prim and proper. You know, I mean, I think just taking a step back and seeing that there are lots of other congregations out there that we could help each other is huge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think getting back to the essentials, right? I don't think you come to church because the polity is great. The polity is at the service of the community and it's supposed to make life better, right? But those very basics of what are you after? And see, so for me in a community, I want a community that's going to help me figure out how to live. I want a community where I can show up a hot mess, having just screamed at my children, and one of them still doesn't have her shoes on. And they're going to love me anyway and put their arms around me and tell me that, no, I'm not the worst mother, and laugh, and then help me find some perspective.
Yeah.
Right. I learned the theology of forgiveness sitting in the car on Sunday mornings when the kids are crying because I've been screaming at them because they'd all lost their shoes and now we're going to church.
And you're going to preach on peacemaking.
That's right. That's right. And so I learned that, okay, well then now the sermon had better start with what just happened in the car, right? You know, but
Well, and we can enjoy modeling that. I mean, one of the things we've enjoyed doing at our last session meeting was instead of doing the normal routine, after devotions, we had 2 or 3 discussion points. We spent 15, 20 minutes on each one of those. That was the meat of things while we were fresh. Who cares if the minutes are... So we did that, and then we had kind of an omnibus motion. Okay, who needs a quick update from any committee? We approved the minutes. Here's the finance report. Are there any questions? And I have moved, after learning this from 30 years, the pastor's report to the end. Everybody's tired, so I'm looking down through going, well, just read that, read that, read that. And yeah, let me just emphasize one thing here.
Mhm.
If we model that, then the elders leave a meeting actually with more energy than less, and then take it to worship and say, you know, I like your idea there. If people are talking at the beginning saying, the prelude this morning will be 10 minutes and you're it. At 10 minutes after 10, we're going to have the call to worship. But actually the call to worship was just your chatting. And why are we doing this? And you could just stand up and say what you just told us. You know, one of the things I love about this church is the way we gab at the beginning and gab at the end. Now, the old way of handling that was a pastor who would say, worship committee, how do we shut people up at the beginning? You stand up and you tell them, organist, play really loudly. That doesn't work. Play really softly. That doesn't work. But it's not just giving them what they want. It's responding to what they need. And you've given me a great idea. I appreciate it.
Now
I
John doesn't
haven't
have
thought
to
of that
write a
before.
sermon for Sunday.
Yeah. The bulletin's already done for Sunday, but
You can do it next week.
yeah.
Yeah.
But have some fun.
Mm-hmm.
If you need some fun, and 30 years, 40, geez, 35 years ago, I started doing Holy Humor Sundays. Anyone here ever done those? Okay.
I don't know what was it, John?
Yeah, and it started because somebody asked me, John, when was the last time you had fun preaching? And I said, oh, I love to preach. They said, no, that's not what I asked. When did you have fun preaching? If you remember the movie Patch Adams,
Mm-hmm.
okay, Robin Williams.
Came in with a big red nose.
Yeah, I did those for a children's sermon once. But he started a fellowship of merry Christians. And they brought back in Bright Sunday, the week after Easter, traditionally from the Roman Catholic tradition. After a long period of Lent, Easter, you had Smile Sunday or Joyful or Jubilate Sunday. And what Patch Adams and his group of merry Christians did was to develop from the fellowship a joyful noise letter. Just Google Holy Humor Sunday.
Mhm.
And you can have a lot of fun with joy. This isn't just laughter and comic stuff, but let me give you two quick illustrations of how you can do something. What do you get when you cross a Jehovah's Witness with a Presbyterian? Somebody who goes around knocking on doors, but they don't say anything. Now, that's funny because it's true. And then you say, what is it about Presbyterians that we just don't like to share our faith?
Mhm.
And then you have something to talk about. Or you say something like this. Why do you think Jesus had only men for disciples? And then I won't give you all the answers, but look it up. You can have some joy in the service, and it becomes Psalm 150, and you live out Psalm 150 and play all those instruments. You make some noise, you have some quiet, you use humor as a way of bringing people together. And you're going to upset a couple of folks who have been trained to do things decently and in order. But you're going to open up other ones. So just something like that.
And
It's
you
very
can
easy to
reassure
do. The services are there.
You can reassure those people that, look, this is one Sunday, relax. Your hymnal will be there the next week, right? The other thing is, do you know about the 1001 Worshiping Community Initiative in the PCUSA? They're giving grants and things, getting people to try new ways of doing church. There's one community that started by they rented all these canoes and invited families to come canoeing. And that's how the community got started. And then the people that were canoeing who wanted to I forget if it was a prayer group or a Bible study group then afterwards, but it wasn't that model where if you sit through a sermon, then you can go canoeing. It was, we're all going to go canoeing. And now these of us are going to go over here and do this Bible study. You can come too if you want. Do you see the difference between like the soup kitchen where you have to hear the sermon first and then you get to eat, right?
You have to eat the soup, and then if you want to, you can hear the sermon.
Yeah. I think Jesus is much happier with that model myself. Yeah. So it's to loosen up, to play, to have some fun, and seriously to sit with that question of, what do you need? What is your deep hunger? What do you need from the church? Is there any joy in it for you? Right? What is church for you? Is your church helping you figure out how to live in this crazy world right now? What is it that you don't know?
And it works both ways, because I mean, I talked Holy Humor Sunday, but you can also say, what's the worst thing that's happened to you this week? Turn to your neighbor. It's a little harder with COVID, but you can still do it. And just tell them the worst thing that happened to you. And as soon as you say it, of course, we know psychologically this is a good thing. It's like sharing concerns, but it's a little different. You want to pray for somebody who's in cancer treatment. No. This is about you. What was the worst moment of your life this last week? Why isn't worship a time to express that and let it go? Or at least to begin to let it go by simply naming it. So,
And that too, I think we can do in lots of different ways, because I'm always very aware of the introverts, because believe it or not, I'm an introvert, right? And if I can always think of something to say, because I'm also a pastor, but the truth is, I'm happiest if you give me a question ahead of time and let me think about it. And I may not want to share it with anybody. I may want to sit and write it down to God, or just might sit and think about it with God. Or I think we need to do things in lots of different ways and lots of different styles.
You've got a nice building there in Newark. I was in it once a long time ago. Here's another thing I did once to get out of the church sanctuary. I said, you all have a choice. Here's 6 places you can go in our building. This is over in Coshocton. Or you can stay right here. And we're going to take 15 minutes. And the sermon is this. Go up to the balcony, sit in front of the Jesus in Gethsemane window. Read the scripture, not my will, but thine be done. Go over to the stairway and sit in front of the window of Mary and Martha and Jesus. And at the foot of Jesus is a sleeping dog. Contemplate your pets in your life and sit on those stairs and look at that dog. Go over to the grand piano and sit at the grand piano. Imagine yourself at a concert. Imagine yourself Rachmaninoff, and there they are going with that little kid doing tiddly.
Turn the church
Yeah.
into a scavenger hunt.
Yeah, go to the chapel, sit there and open up a hymnal to this number and simply read that hymn. Use the building in a creative way and allow the introvert extroverts to do whichever they prefer. You want to sit there, just sit there.
Mhm.
Open up the Bible. Here's our passage for today. But get on your feet for those that are just anxious and need to move, and or if it's nice out, go out, sit on the front steps and tell me how many pagans go by in the cars. Just count them.
Set
That's
up a
fun,
bunch
by
of
the way.
Going to second
Here-
pres.
What?
second pres. You said keep that. Oh, you're going to do that to a second pres?
I said, does that include the ones going to second pres?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
Right.
top
Say
of the
hi to
list. Yeah.
Todd. Right.
But go back to what Katie said and ask people, why do you come to church? And are you getting what you need? And we pastors, I don't always take the time to ask myself that question before I launch into sermon preparation.
Mm. Yeah.
Kim's been quiet.
Well, Kim, one of the things I'm wondering about your congregation is, have you had anybody help you grieve or rage or lament or whatever it is? Have you had a space for that, or has it all been, oh, well, what are we going to do now?
That's a good question. I mean, little bits here and there, but maybe not as much as, I don't know. It's a good question of what other people need.
Here's an idea. Covenant Church does a wonderful Blue Christmas service. It's designed, you familiar with those?
Mm-mm.
I have a bunch of them I can send you. I used to do the service at Covenant. So
and it's a tough service, but it's for those who are grieving or going through loss, and their Christmas is blue, not orange and green and everything else. You might consider doing that service.
it's also called can be called the longest night. And Walter Brueggemann has some great stuff on lamentation. Jan Richardson has some really powerful stuff on her website. And she has a book of prayers called The Cure of Sorrow. Anyway, if you decide you want to follow down this path at all, let me know. I've got a ton of resources.
Katie's got some great stuff. It can be adapted. You don't have to work that hard at it, but it's a way to lament, to grieve, and as worship, and as a community of faith. And there's joy in there because the underlying message is one of hope. But it doesn't just hand it out as pablum. It says we have to work at that. And the way we get to hope is through grieving, and that sense of loss opens up the way for a sense of wholeness, but not if we skip over it.
And I think sometimes we think we're failing in hope because we don't feel better. but hope isn't really meant to be a feeling. One definition of hope I really like is, I think this comes from Walter Brueggemann too, is it's being able to imagine another reality. It doesn't mean you feel better yet. It's having, or at least being able to imagine that there could be a better reality, right? Holding on to God's dream for the world.
It allows for feelings in worship that we normally say you can't have there.
Yeah, that's one of the worst things about church. You know, this, so I don't mean this to be Mormon slamming at all, but I lived in Utah for a while, in Salt Lake City, and there was a common ethic, you know, like Presbyterians not talking about their faith and being dour. For Mormons, it was having a smile planted on their face, no matter what they were telling you, or no matter what was going on in their lives. And Christians can do this too. I can think of several people in congregations that think it's the most, if you're trusting in God, you're happy. And because you're accepting whatever God gives you, right? So you smile. And it's a pathological, soul damaging condition. And we can fall into things like that all the time, where we think if we don't push ourselves into cheerfulness or happiness or acceptance at breakneck speeds, or at least faster than we're going, we are somehow not being faithful to God. And that's just not true. Jesus was in that wilderness for a really long time, right? And got gold out of being there. And we forget that. Right. It is 8:22. So we don't have to stay till 8:30. I'm not saying that. I'm happy to talk about whatever. Obviously, John and I are here. We can talk about anything all night. Just give us a second to sip some water and we're good. But are there questions about what you would do next? Anybody have anything that you need to ask? And you can reach out anytime to me. That my email is, I've got a couple you could use. An easy one to remember is Rev, R-E-V, Katie, K-A-T-I-E, K, it's Katie Kinnison. So Rev, Katie K @gmail. And you can also call me or text me. It's 614-625-1335.
And you'll get some really good stuff.
You'll get something. I can always point you to a resource because I own a library. Still books up all down. I have a lot of things in my office in Hilliard now, but there are still books on all the steps going.
And she keeps the good ones. Everything that's banned by a local school system, she buys and puts on her shelf.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep. It's a good way to get me to buy a book. Tell me somebody banned it. A little bit of a rebel. Just a little. I was raised by parents of the 60s, you know. Well, I appreciate you all being here very much. I've enjoyed the conversation. I hope there's been some gold in it for you, and I've appreciated what you shared, all of you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I would just add for the three of you, the people in Presbytery stay pretty busy, and they don't, on commissions, don't always have time to do the things that need to be done. However, if any of you have a specific question, send it to Katie. I need help with this, or if it's one little thing like a Blue Sunday service, or it's tell me a supply minister who's very creative and can bring joy. We're just down right now. And Katie will have some answers and say, here's 2 or 3 places you can go for this. And it's there. You have to ask for it, though.
And we have a new chair on congregational life who's got a lot of energy and is starting to do a lot of new things. And
Who's the
Yeah.
new chair?
Mark Parsons.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, presbytery it's all elders and pastors who are already overworked. So that's a real thing. But just, this vitality that we're talking about and all these remedies, we're trying to apply the same things at the presbytery level. So that we're not just burnout and working on fumes, but really are more vital and effective in the world.
Yeah. When we really are all on the same boat. The boat's leaking a little bit more in certain congregations. And others seem to have a pretty solid boat, but we all need the wind of the Holy Spirit in the sails. I don't care how good your hull is. You can go to hell in a good hull. It's the Spirit in the sail.
Yep. And you can be on the Queen Mary and still be in despair, right? So yeah, it's all the textures and colors and flavors of life. We've got them all. Well,
Thank you, Katie.
thank you. And may the Spirit of the living God fill you to overflowing. May the Spirit give you peace when your head hits the pillow. May the Spirit wake you with energy and with whispers of your belovedness. And as you step your feet on the ground, may you know that it is holy and that not only a bush, but the world is on fire with the breath and the Spirit and the power of God. Amen. May it be so.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.